Gather round, one and all, and listen to tales of excitement and adventure. Tales of daring heroes, savage monsters, and bards who just couldn't keep it in their pants. Tales of friendship, nobility, drunken foolishness, and unforgettable fun. These are tales of role-playing games, fair listeners, and this is Rollin' Bones. My name is Ryan Howard, and I shall be your guide. How about now? Can you hear us now? How about now? Oh, apparently Doug Barry 88 here says that he can hear us.
Hey, Doug, how are you, man?
Okay, yeah. Kathy, turn up or Elfie, turn up the audio on your device. And Doug, since you were in the chat, can you please let me know if I sound like a robot?
Not in the way that he's a soulless monster, but in like an audio form,
Yes.
you know?
Yeah, are you hearing me twice is the question that I'm asking. Okay. Since I'm going to assume that they can hear us.
Okay.
We've already been unprofessional enough as it is. So
Of
if this
course.
persists and you guys can't hear us, just let me know. And again, let me know if I sound like a robot. So Caleb, welcome to Rollin' Bones. As always, we are up to our usual standard of polish here. For those of you who can just now hear us, Caleb is of course the GM for Sounds Like Crows, which is a Deadlands actual play podcast. Is that an accurate description of your show, Caleb? As I drop my phone,
It is. I would also say that we're doing Savage Worlds and not Deadlands Classic, which is hugely disappointing to many Deadlands fans I've heard over the years. But we're enjoying Savage Worlds. It's a great system. Super fun. But yeah, we play a show. All the player characters are brothers, and their mom gets murdered, and they kind of have to figure out who did it while they all hate each other. It's been really cool. We've played through Deadlands Reloaded into having Suede getting released, and now the Deadlands Kickstarter, and we're excited to switch over to those rules whenever we have like a workable rule set in hand. Pretty hyped about that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, as a Kickstarter backer at this point, for everyone who is at Marshall level or higher on that Kickstarter campaign. We do have the pre-release rules right now. I've decided not to review them yet because, as Shane said in the update, this is pre-release. This is not a final product yet, so no review until we have something, closer to the final product, just so everyone out there knows.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I'm not sure when we're going to switch over either. I don't know what edition. Suede very quickly after that Kickstarter finish got to the point where like it was great and we just worked off the PDF for a long time. Although I miss having a physical book in hand, but we do with Suede now. Just be the same journey with the Deadlands books again.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Caleb, we're going to start off this interview the same way we start all of these interviews. I've got these questions that everyone gets asked, and so we're going to start at the very beginning. How did you get into RPGs?
My brother Isaac would oh man, there's like 3 stories I could tell. I don't know which one I haven't told yet. But I'll tell the most sappy one. When I was a kid, when I was like 5 or 6, my oldest brother, in a tradition similar to the characters in this show, we all had bunk beds. There were 4 of us in one room. We were all 2 years apart. He was the oldest, and he would tell us these stories, which were kind of like loosely adapted from books that he had just read that he was stealing wholesale from. And then we would kind of get to make these choices and go through them, and we'd have fun doing that. And then one day he showed up and he was like, hey, there's like a game we can do that's like that, where I don't have to like do this dumb thing. We can like roll dice and yada yada. And so he got me into that. He brought me to this like 3.5 D&D game when I was like 8 or 9 and really pissed off the GM. It was bad, man. At one point, the GM, I was playing a cleric. The GM literally said, let's take a break where the cleric figures out what the hell he's going to do, and then stands up and walks away from the table. And then he got real busy and he couldn't GM anymore. So he talked me into GMing when I was like 13 or something. And then I just sort of been running games for a long time with very few breaks.
Oh, that is fantastic.
Yeah.
I can only imagine. I know, like from the perspective of an 8-year-old, just a whole bunch of older guys just being super pissed off at you while you're trying to have fun. I understand where that, that can cause some consternation. But on the other side of it, 3.5.
Yeah.
And an 8-year-old shows up at the table.
Yeah, and he didn't tell him either. Like I showed up, which man, yeah, I as a GM, I totally understand. I think I would be pretty upset if one of my players brought their 8-year-old brother to the table without telling me. But it was fine. Worked out. Just never played with that guy again.
Yeah, I mean, I think I could deal with it in 5th edition. 5th edition's pretty simple to teach people. Yeah. But 3.5, no.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I did that for a while, man. Just hosted a bunch of games. Was kind of like the permanent GM for a while. My brother ran some games when he got out of college, and yeah, I don't know. Just anyone that will play with me, I generally have run games for until we started this podcast, and then my free time went out the window. So I'm sure you're aware.
Gibson Taylor in the chat. Cleric cast puberty.
Oh man.
Oh, it's 3.5. You're gonna have to take greater puberty.
Yeah, and there's probably some like spell components. I'm making that shit up. I don't know. I don't remember 3.5 very well.
And then I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this question, but of course everyone gets the chance to answer for themselves. So what is your favorite game system of all the ones that you've played?
Dread, pretty easily. I love Savage Worlds. It's a great system. However, if you're talking about sort of like peak pretentious, like if you were a game critic, if I was a game critic, I would choose Dread because it everything it wants to do, it does perfectly and without any, like, I don't know what the word is, but the system does exactly what it wants to do, with no tangents, with no parts that you don't like. It uses just the space it needs, and I've never had such a consistent time at the table than playing Dread. Like, it just consistently makes a good horror game regardless of the players or the GM, in my opinion. If you follow the rules, it just makes everyone tense up and stressful, which I think is really cool from a game design perspective. On the topic of playtime, it's probably Savage Worlds at this point for sure. Maybe 3.5. I ran a West Marches game. We ran like 60 sessions in 6 months. And then I ran a few campaigns outside of that in 5th edition of Dungeons and Dragons. But Savage Worlds, we've been playing for a long time on and off, sort of switching between that and whatever, Dungeons and Dragons was out at the time, or Pathfinder, which have you, standard fantasy fare for those people that want to play fantasy, Alex, I'm looking at you, buddy.
Now, I've never actually gotten the chance to play Dread. Typically, when people talk about horror games, of course, they're talking about Call of Cthulhu, but that's interesting. I'm gonna have to see if I can try out a session of Dread as a player.
It's in person only. I won't spend a huge amount of time pitching the game, but you play it with a Jenga tower, and then every time you make a skill check in a normal RPG, you just pull a brick, and if you knock over the tower, your character dies during that action, and that's the whole game. So it's very simplistic.
That's brilliant.
It's really good, but you only can play in person, which is the downside. But if we're at the same convention, dude, hit me up.
Absolutely.
I will run Dread.
Man, that's like the tension that's already present in a game of Jenga, plus spooky stories. So that's perfect.
Yeah,
I love
man.
that.
It's really good. Yeah,
I love that so much.
Love you though, Savage Worlds.
Mm-hmm. Yep. A lower stress level version of Jenga.
Not to keep going on a Jenga tangent, but I've seen Jenga played with chess clocks, and that makes me really want to play Jenga with chess clocks, like where you only have a minute on each side. Seems pretty cool.
Yep. And if you'll indulge me for one more tangent, I just have this burning question deep within my soul. Ever since I've heard of the concept of a West Marches game, I've always wondered, logistically, how do you manage that? I talked about it on the podcast with Luke Hart of the DM Layer. He had the same question. So, as someone who's run a West Marches game, logistically, how do you manage that?
Do you want me to break down like scheduling or prep work or like running the game itself? What do you think?
So scheduling, I feel like that's kind of in a way, the simplest, because you have all your players' schedules, kind of who can do when, and you just put those together. I want to know prep wise, how do you deal with that?
Oh man, the idea would be, in an ideal world, you would front load it. I could either talk about how I did it or how I would do it in the future. So I'll probably talk about that. Before you start the game, you've literally just got to spend like 3 months just grinding out prep work. And I think a lot of it to me was I would do really bare bones stuff and then come up with the rest of the stuff at the table. Or if I had a really good idea, sometimes there'd be a fully written out, realized dungeon. But most of the time it was not. It was, hey, here's some cool monsters. Here's the idea of the dungeon. Figure it out when the players get there. And then I just sort of on the fly put together encounters and stuff while looking at my computer and pretending to look at notes. I think I ended up with about 50 or 60 pages of prepped content, and each location on a hex was normally about half a page. So I think a lot of it's you just got to be willing to improvise, and really, like, everyone's kind of coming to the table expecting to die or expecting to kind of have a suboptimal D&D experience. It's not really a normal game of Dungeons and Dragons. So I don't know, man. Front load the prep, and hope they don't go in one direction way further than you expected them to. A large part of it too near the end was players would tell me where they were planning to go, and once you lay out the groundwork of they've scouted enough, the scouting session sort of stopped for us, and it became, okay, we're going to go clear that tower. And then I could go in there, see half the page that I wrote, and then turn that into an adventure, like kind of scaled to where it was and the level of the players that were coming in. But mostly a lot of lying to the players about how much I had prepped. So yeah.
Gotcha.
There's no good way. There's no good way. I can't imagine actually prepping out 3 locations for every like 12 mile by 12 mile hex on a board. It was crazy. I think what I do in the future is give them paths, sort of make it linear instead of you start. How I did it was they start on the coast and they could just sort of progress west. And I think that was a mistake. I think I would have made these slivers that they could choose to go down and have each of those be a biome that, gets more advanced as they go along. But what did I know? It's fine.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So you've talked a little bit about this this first character of yours, the cleric that you brought to the table. Do you remember the cleric's name?
Yeah, I did what every new player to D&D does, whereas you just take your screen name and throw it on a character and then kind of hope that's a good character name. So I did Corso from what was that movie that ended where the planet's name was Bob? Titan AE, maybe? It's like an animated movie.
So yeah, Titan AE. Yep.
I think the main character's name was Corso. So the name was Corso, and I figured I didn't know anything, so I was just like, they're 18, they're just out of cleric school, and they're gonna show up. It was great. The magic, I don't know what it was for you, because I feel like everybody has this magic moment in D&D where at least the people that, not D&D, in RPGs and tabletop RPGs, where you first kind of realize that you can do whatever you want. And for me, it was in that game where I had the light spell and I was just sort of imagining like casting a light and it would floating along with us. And the GM was like, no, you gotta cast it on something. And I was like anything, like I could do my armor. He's like, yeah, just put it on an object. I don't care what it is. And so I'm like, okay, well, I'll cast it on my armor. And he's like, great. Cleric lights up like a Christmas tree. Great. And then 10 minutes later, my brother-in-law, this rogue, was sneaking ahead, and then we were all following behind. And he's like, great. Well, your stealth roll doesn't matter because everybody sees the cleric. Roll initiative. Which, he should have done a better job explaining it, but it was a cool moment for me to be like, oh shit, I did that,
Yeah, I mean, that seems like first of all, it sounds like that guy was a bad GM, but it seems like this is a moment of, I am going to show this kid just how unwelcome he is at this table by screwing over every single other person here.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Screw that guy. I don't know his name, but go to hell.
And so in the games that you've done since then as a GM and, running multiple different games, a lot of GMs have NPCs that travel with them from game to game. So do you have a forever NPC?
Oh man, no. I can't even think of one that's gone between games. Do you have one of those? Do you do that?
I do. I've got it's my first player character. My current Saturday group has already made jokes about, his name is Cromwell McGuinn, and they've already encountered two different versions of him from two different realities, and they've already made jokes about going into the Cromwell verse. So
yeah, it just, I don't know. I never had anybody that stuck with me. I did bring back one of my PCs to the start of this other game with the intention that one of the other players would kill him. And he did, and it made my brother very upset because he really liked that character, and I just got him murdered. It's very exciting.
Yep, and as Elfie is alluding to in chat, for multiple sessions up until just recently, and even that's kind of pushing it, they still don't quite trust him. They think that Cromwell's the bad guy.
Of course. I mean, that's going to happen, right?
Hmm. And so when it comes to GMing and it comes to playing, we all come to the table with different styles of play. How would you describe your style as a GM and as a player?
Um, as a player, I don't know how to break it down. As a player, something I like to do is be as well. First of all, I just like to be generous to other people and try to help out other people and try to create conversations that if I know they care something about their character, like if they're sitting in the corner of camp and they're reading this book, I'll be like, hey, what are you reading over there? That sort of thing. Um, I really like trying to do arcs for characters within every session. I generally, my opinion is going to change on this a bunch, but right now being a player is like a little bit boring for me, especially when you get beyond that like 3 player mark,
Hmm.
going from GM where you're like the bottle gap of all action to being a player. It's just a little bit of a bummer sometimes.
Hmm.
So I try to get around that by trying to figure out how I can make my character have a little arc within every single session, and that's pretty challenging. Um, as a GM, I'd say the distinguishing stuff I have from most other people I've played with, or at least watched or listened to, um, would be that I really like the players to have as much agency as humanly possible. Like in an ideal world, I would talk for 30% of a session. Um, and obviously, that's not possible most of the time. But I really like setting up people in a way where they feel encouraged to do that sort of thing. Like something I always say when new players play with me is I'll go, hey, if you want something that makes sense, just say you have it. You don't have to go, hey man, is there like a chandelier in this bar? Be like, yeah, there's a chandelier. Cool.
Hmm.
So I want to like kind of is it high? Is it low enough that I can jump up and grab it? I don't want that. I just want, so I'm going to try to run up and jump off like a table that's in this room, jump up to the chandelier and swing across to attack this guy. So I think that's something I think that differentiates me from other people. And then just trying to put as much of the story in their hands as possible and try to get them to give me as many descriptions as possible too, as opposed to me describing every death that occurs in a fight.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of, there's a lot of stuff like that that as GMs we can kind of, streamline. Um,
Yeah.
and especially if it's like a rule of cool situation where, the player has a really cool idea for that chandelier. If they can just reach up and grab it, then might as well give it to them.
Yeah, for real. Something I always talk about is if the mechanical effect would be no different, why do we care?
Mm-hmm.
Like if someone wants to pick up a chair and smash someone with it, I kind of feel that should do the same damage as like a regular attack should do. You
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't penalize players for creativity. If anything, it should be the opposite,
Yeah.
which I think Savage Worlds does pretty well.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to catch up with chat going on here, Gibson has discovered the math of why you shouldn't trust the GM, and Tanta Claus would like to let you know that he loves you.
Aw, thanks, Santa Claus. You're the best, man. Dang. Yeah, Jason, yeah, you cannot trust. I okay. Can we go off questions here for a second? Can I
Absolutely,
pose this
absolutely.
question to
Let's
you?
do this.
I don't think I've said this on air. Okay. I think you have an obligation as a GM to lie to your players out of game and in game. It's like a magic trick. It's
Mm-hmm.
like you're any any amount of lying is fine if it justifies the players having a better time at the table. What do
Mm-hmm.
you think?
Yeah,
What do you think? That seems reasonable.
yeah, yeah. Up until like after it happens, if someone comes up to like after a session, if it's not going to unravel later stuff, if someone comes up and asks you point blank, at that point, sure, be honest. But up until then, like the whole yes, definitely keep things under wrap, obfuscate, and lie to your players if necessary.
Cool. Okay, great. I didn't know if that was a hot take or not. I've been thinking that for years, and I didn't know if anyone would feel that's morally unacceptable. But at least you and me will go down together.
Yeah,
You know.
absolutely. Absolutely. And if anyone asks us, because we are pathological liars in that sense, we can just tell them someone else said it on a different stream. And
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. Send it to somebody else.
And the video and audio record of this will, I don't know.
Well, we can alter it. We can alter it. We can
Yep.
figure that out. Yeah.
Yep.
This is a high production value show.
Yep. Absolutely. Yes. Yes. As you can tell by our stellar audio at the beginning, this
And the fact that both of us have blankets in the background,
Yeah.
which I.
Yep. And typically I have a cat, so
Okay, that's pretty good. My wife took the dogs so they would not interfere because they would.
Mhm. So there's a lot of good memories that show up at the table. Those of us who've dedicated so much of our time and energy to this game, we have a lot of these good memories. If you had to pick one, what would it be? What's your fondest RPG memory?
Oh my god, dude. That is um
Who's your favorite child?
yeah, I could take something from the show for sure. Oh man, that would be a funny story also is really difficult, you know. But I would say any chance that I get to surprise people at the table is something I'm pretty happy about. I'm going to pick on my friend Alex here. He once he was like, "Hey man, I'm not feeling this character. I got to bring a new character into the game." I said, "Okay, cool, yeah, not a problem." So he builds this character, and they're like an orc who has like a velociraptor as a pet, and it's very like Klingon, very Worf, very I am the biggest, baddest warrior in the room, you know. And we talked at the time we were working together, so we'd been talking for like 2 weeks about this character, and he had this whole introduction in his mind, and I was like, great, it's perfect. I'll bring you out right in the middle of a fight that like they're kind of doing badly at, and you can come out and you can just ruin their competition, and we'll show off how cool you are. Then the first thing that happened was they were attacked by this swarm of crows, funnily enough, in Pathfinder. And then he comes running out of the wood line, goes to charge them. They attack him, and he immediately becomes blinded for the rest of the encounter while he like flails around, missing every attack. And I think the best part about it is he's still mad about it, like literally 8 years later. Makes me really happy to know he's so upset about it, to be honest. And I think that's a good RPG moment, you know, of like, this character now is not going to be the character that you pictured to you or to anybody else at that table, and you're just going to have to roll with it, man. And that's what he did, and the character was funnier than I think he wanted him to be, but I really liked him. I don't remember his name though, sorry. Too many characters.
And Doug is asking that you leave Alex alone in leave Brittany alone fashion.
Okay, I mean, well, when he gets on the stream, I'll leave him alone.
Absolutely. Yep. We'll have said nothing about good things, or nothing but good things about him.
Yes.
When he shows up in chat, yeah. So unfortunately, now that we've had a good story, we of course have to sink the ship a little bit, because while we share the table with all kinds of great people, some of them become our best friends in the whole wide world. Some of them we just don't click with, as we've heard about with your first GM there.
Yeah.
So if you have a that guy story that you are comfortable sharing on the podcast, now is the time. Go for it.
Okay, I got a question. How would you feel about a board game story instead? Is that okay?
That will work.
Okay. I was playing Diplomacy, which for the unfamiliar is a game. I think it's World War One. You know, sort of this war game where you take a turn and then everybody has 15 minutes to negotiate and talk about the game before the next turn happens and make alliances. And the game lasts about 12 hours. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that I'm currently drinking whiskey right now, but this guy I had not met before just showed up with like a, entire handle of Jack, which nobody else drank. By the way, and he showed up. I don't know his name. I only know that he played Austria, and we just called him Austria the rest of the night. And he came in, basically every gamer stereotype that you can imagine. This man was. I don't think I need to get into that. And then just the whole game, man, he was super abrasive. He got really upset with anybody that like screwed him over in any way. And then 6 hours in, he fell asleep on the couch with an empty bottle of Jack. And then we just like, well, okay, bye, buddy. And then he woke up and Austria was gone. And then he lumbered out. I never saw him again.
Now, was this at a convention or like?
This was at my best friend's house at the time. I was just one of the people he invited because I don't know how many, I think it's like an 8-person game. Mm-hmm. So whenever you get an 8-person game, somebody there is going to be someone you'd never hang out with normally just because you need to fit somebody at the table. Yeah. So it was at my best friend's house. It was fine. It was fine. He didn't break anything.
Absolutely.
I've been pretty lucky, man. With West March, I think we ended up going through 50 players total. We had about 30 active players, and none of them were very, I don't know. A few of them were a little strange, as we all are, but no one was mean or mean-spirited that showed up. I really haven't had that many bad experiences, but I've only been to one convention also, so I'm sure it will come. There's a story I'll tell you off mic, but yeah.
All good. So this is the last of our introductory questions. This one has flummoxed a lot of people, and I'll tell you the answer can be as philosophical or as sophomoric as you want it to be.
Okay.
If you could put anything on a t-shirt, what would it be?
I really like wraparound t-shirts. I wish the technology was more readily available for that type of thing. But just give me something crazy, cool, watercolor looks, and wrap it around the whole shirt, man. And that's it. Without it being tie-dye. You're imagining like a tie-dye shirt right now? Don't imagine that. Imagine like real glossy finish, like Starfield almost, That's all I have. That's all I have. I don't know what I'd put on a t-shirt. That's it.
Gotcha.
Print it.
Absolutely. Gibson Taylor wants to ask hypercolor.
Hypercolor. Ooh, yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. Perhaps. What if it only? No, never mind. Let's not be mean to colorblind people. Let's not be mean to colorblind people. Oh man.
So, when it comes to playing Savage Worlds, playing Deadlands, how did that come about? And then from there, how did the idea come about of let's do an actual play podcast?
Totally. My brother Isaac, once again, ran a Deadlands Reloaded game many years ago. It was one of my favorite games I've ever played in. It was very short. And I was just super intrigued. We grew up with Westerns and if you look at the collection of VHS the libraries had in the late 90s, it was like war movies and Westerns.
Yeah.
And so we watched a lot of Westerns and then watched every Western at Blockbuster. And we just really enjoyed that theme. And then adding that with monsters was really cool. I really enjoyed the Savage World system. Acing, I know other systems do it, but I would say Savage Worlds is known for it, right? I mean,
oh yeah.
So I would say that game brought me in and really hooked me. And then my brother Isaac introduced me to the One Shot podcast and then the Campaign podcast, which are both Campaign was run by Cat Cool and One Shot's run by James D'Amato, who now runs Campaign as well. And I was so inspired by their GMing. like I remember listening to them and going, this is impossible. What they're doing is incredible. And I wish I could do this. And then I just spent many years trying to copy them. And then when we were sort of in the middle of West March, my friend Cameron Day, we were all hanging out drunk at 3 a.m. And, I brought up the idea of it would be cool to do a podcast like that, but I don't know what I'm doing and I don't have the time. And he was like, well, obviously you have the time. You're running 3 to 4 games a week for, 4 to 8 hours, and then you're working full time. Like you could do it if you stopped doing West March. And I'd been kind of playing around with audio editing stuff for a few years before that, just for fun projects. And there's also this quote that's been really inspirational to me. I don't remember his last name, but his first name's Lewis. And he said, if you look at something and you think, I could do better than that, you should just do it. And I think when you look at, it's very nice that podcasting is so inclusive and anybody can do it and anybody can just upload their stuff online. But I spent a lot of time trying to find shows that I thought were as high quality as those two shows were. And there was not a lot of options, and that frustrated me. And there were even less shows that weren't trying to be comedic. There weren't a lot of shows that were trying to be dramatic, which is how we play at the table. Like it's still funny, but that's what I inspire to be. So we started that. We talked about game systems. We were super into Savage Worlds at the time. I said, let's bring back Deadlands because I've tried to get my brother to run Deadlands for years and years and years before we started this. I run another game of it. So we started that up, and then we landed pretty quickly on the brothers idea. And and that was 2.5 years ago.
Yeah, and just that notion of, you guys are your characters are brothers who are trying to get to the bottom of the murder of their mother. It's a very Western idea, and it's really kind of a stroke of brilliance, kind of right out of that old Western movie playbook of you have all these characters with this one central thing that ties them together, having to work together towards this goal even though they don't get along with each other.
Yeah, man. Something Rob Stith from the Orpheus Protocol said was, your story should be about your characters. And that's another thing that actual plays, I feel like a lot of them miss the mark. It should be about your character and the interaction with the characters that they know, instead of here's a few adventurers thrown into a story, which is fine for a table game. But if you're trying to tell a compelling story, I think that's pretty necessary. And then growing up with brothers, it just sort of seemed natural to us. We grew up with Sons of Katie Elder. There was a terrible remake, Four Brothers, that came out, I would say recently, but it's probably 2000s at this point. And yeah, we got into it that way. And I think every game I do from now on is pretty much, hey, here's where your characters start. Here's kind of who they are. You can figure out everything else you want, but this is going to be their living situation. This is going to be kind of the people they know, and then let people figure it out from there. And I think it helps players too to have that focus. And then without the benefit of like Powered by the Apocalypse playbooks, it also gives them another reason to build connections with other party members that maybe they wouldn't if you didn't give them that opportunity. Yeah.
And Elfie would like to remind everyone out there that the 2000s are in fact still recent, despite that being 2 decades ago.
Well, 2019 was 5 years ago.
Yes,
so
yes, absolutely. Or at least 5 crises ago.
At least.
And so, I mean, one thing that I really just want to, applaud you and your players for is, having the dedication to something like Deadlands. One thing that I've discovered in trying to get people to play Deadlands is the idea of a Western game is kind of a novelty to a lot of players. They're like, oh, that would be fun once. And then you do it, and they're like, okay, cool. And then if you try to do it again, they're like, fantasy.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel that, man. Every game I've ever run that isn't fantasy, people are like, well, this is cool, but, I kind of want a sword. So I don't know what that is. I don't know what the obsession with it
Mhm.
is. I had a conversation about it recently, which gave me no insight at all. Um, but yeah, there's a lot you can do with it.
Mhm.
And there's kind of untapped potential too, you know. Um, I kind of like where westerns are now, where you have, I mean, Quentin Tarantino is the best example, or modern Clint Eastwood stuff is so much the antithesis of what westerns are. You know, they've gone full circle from uh, John Wayne shooting, you know, black hatted cowboys into just a deconstruction of morality, which is what I kind of think is interesting about westerns. Is it's a very real way to talk about uh, death and law and justice and all these themes that feel closer because everyone has guns and people are kind of talking like people do. Feels closer than fantasy.
Mhm.
Um, but the other thing that's kind of underplayed about it is, like fantasy, there are so many common tropes you can pull out, which immediately give everyone the same shared mental image, which is really, really important. If you play,
Mhm.
if you're creating your own world and you know your your cars are like hover bikes that are run by scarabs, you know, it's hard for people to kind of wrap their heads around that. But if you just
Mhm.
say covered wagon, everyone knows what a covered wagon is, you know.
Mhm.
Everybody knows how a horse is. There's so many things you can describe that will immediately get into people's imaginations the same way that fantasy does.
Mhm.
And Deadlands has the advantage of, like, man, there's so much you could do. I mean, we haven't even touched rail barons. We haven't gotten super into any of the ghost rock stuff. We haven't gotten into like shamanism at all. We haven't gotten into the agency stuff much. It's a big world, man. It's a
Mhm.
big world.
Yeah, and I mean, one thing I continue to applaud Shane for, and one thing that he and I have talked about a couple times on the show, um, just kind of the way that he's turned history on its head, and very clearly he's a student of history, and he paid attention to how it happened, and the slight tweaks that he's made that have made things just kind of go off the rails as far as the meta plot of Deadlands goes are really kind of brilliant. The idea that the Civil War continues on past 1865, and that's why there's all this crazy technology, and there's this new fuel source of ghost rock, and it, it it's
It's cool
great
world building.
juicy details, great world building, and I just love the world of Deadlands. But going off of what you said about, a lot of that familiar iconography that people will immediately latch onto and have the same image of, um, I mean, like you said, westerns are full of that stuff. You can describe the saloon door swinging open and a silhouetted figure standing in the doorway, and immediately people, you've conveyed the image that you want to convey with just a few words, or the idea of a standoff in the town square.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's plenty of plays on it too. Like, you know, Back to the Future 3 springs to mind,
Mm-hmm.
or I don't know. I agree with you on the world building, man. I've tried really hard as a goal to establish as much of the Deadlands world as I can, and like slowly introduce the players, the characters, and the audience at the same time, to sort of this ramping up uh fantastical nature. That's not a good word for it, but of the world. It's so out there. I mean, and even like the zombies are dripping with flavor, you know, the
Yeah.
Black Regiment, man, so cool.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you get all this American folklore.
Mm-hmm.
You get to have jackalopes and Sasquatches and all this other stuff that people are already familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you on the history too, man. It's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
I think if I had a better history education, maybe that would help out too. But you know,
Mm-hmm.
it's fine.
Although history can be a hindrance to your game, and now I have to annoy my regular audience by retreading this story again, but you've got some of your friends on here. You've obviously not heard the story, so here
Oh
we go
man.
again. Rolling Bones, regular Boneheads, the Deadlands incident. Um, so Caleb, just so you have some background, this is the one time I've run Deadlands for friends. This was Deadlands Classic.
Okay.
Because I didn't want to have to explain the Savage Worlds rule set and then explain Deadlands. I thought it would be easier just to do here's Deadlands, it's the rules
Sure.
and the story in the same book, on and on. But I was learning the system and initially trying to run it for about 4 or 5 players.
Okay.
Then other people in my regular gaming group got wind of me running this Western game, as they called it.
Mhm.
And suddenly I have 10 players.
Jesus.
And as Shane later told me, in Deadlands, you should lead with monsters to bring people into the deep historical details you want to tell. That's not what I did. I tried to hook them with, hey guys, have you ever heard of John Wesley Hardin? No? Shit.
Incredible. Incredible. Oh man. John Wesley Hardin is related to some of my best friends, the Hardins.
Oh.
Yeah, he also makes an appearance. It sounds like Rose. He's very quickly murdered, I think, or put in chains or something. But
Mm-hmm.
and then I found out he had stats, and I didn't use those stats. Next time.
Mm-hmm.
Next time. Yeah, dude, never. Oh my God, never. I've run an 8-player game. That was a
Mm-hmm.
terrible mistake, and I was like, I'm never having more than 6 players a game. Ran a 7-player game, horrible time, and then one of my friends, his first time GMing, he's like, "What advice do you have?" And I gave him my whole spiel, and then I was like, "And never have more than 6 players. Maybe go with 4 your first time. Never have more than 6."
Mm-hmm.
Showed up to his first game, 8 players, dude, 8 players.
Mm-hmm.
It was not a good time. It's not a good time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, don't do it, folks. Don't
Mm-hmm.
do it.
Yep. And Gibson makes a good point about Ghost Rock being the small tweak in history and how its presence leads to so much of the changes. And Elfie wants to point out that she sees no problem with leading with the history. And Elfie, that's why we're married. Because it's cool if I lead with the history, but these guys, I'm like, okay, a little bit of background. It's 1871 or 76, I believe, in the Deadlands Classic days. The Civil War is continuing on to this day. Um, you guys are in Dodge City, Kansas, and you're on the trail of one of the most wanted murderers in history, John Wesley Hardin. And the idea that they're in Dodge City means nothing to them. Wyatt Earp shows up, means nothing to them.
Oh no, no, that's not great.
And to make matters worse, I had a player who was a wanted criminal and a player who was a bounty hunter. They were all, instead of doing the one shot thing of you all already know each other, let's get to the good stuff, I did the you meet in a saloon because I wanted to do that because it's you meet in
Yeah,
a tavern but Western.
yeah.
And immediately the bounty hunter was like, he's wanted, I'm gonna take him down. And it was about a half hour of PvP that was not going very well for the bounty
Oh,
hunter.
oh, whoa. Okay. Dude, oh man. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sure that is not a great story burned into your memory.
It was a comedy of errors.
It's okay. You live, you learn.
And
Everyone's had bad sessions.
to cap it all off, one of the 10 players was someone's friend, maybe girlfriend. I don't exactly know the nature of their relationship. She had very clearly been kind of sort of talked into it and was like, oh yeah, playing around pretending to be cowboys, that sounds like fun. And she was
Yeah,
just not into it at all.
yeah. It's okay. Have you had a player fall asleep at the table? Because
Yes.
I have. Okay, cool. Cool, man. Yeah.
Yep, I've had a player get blackout drunk. Um,
Okay. Well, that's a Friday night. That's.
we played on Tuesdays at the time, though. That was the thing.
Oh man.
So, say you are talking to a new listener about, your show. How would you hook them on Sounds Like Crows? What's your elevator pitch for the show?
My elevator pitch is that, man, I I may have already hit all of my talking points. I'm sorry.
All
It's
good.
like it's a story about conflict.
Mm-hmm.
It's about inter-party conflict. That's what I find the most interesting, is that there are five people that are very committed to creating a large interlocking backstory between all of them
Mm-hmm.
that we try to slowly reveal. And it's really fun for me just to sit back at the table and have them argue at each other for 20 minutes until I need to arbitrate a role where one of them needs to punch each other.
Yeah.
um, that's great. If you've never played Savage Worlds or Deadlands, which if you're listening to this, you probably have, it's a great introduction to that. I think we've done a good job laying out the rules, and the introduction to Deadlands is something I'm really proud of. Um, I'd say, I mean, get to episode 4, and if you're not hooked by episode 4, then you're not going to like our show. I think it's very much a Western. I think it's anti-heroes, and oh, man, I love those guys. It's the best game I've ever played in or
Mm-hmm.
run. And it's been a long time. I love these characters. Give it a shot. That's
Awesome.
all.
Awesome.
Also, I guess we are involved in the Deadlands Kickstarter.
Yeah.
And very shortly, we're going to be releasing 4 episodes, I believe, which will just be a one shot with the same cast, using some of the new rules, some maybe not the new rules that we messed up or either didn't have.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that would be a pretty good introduction to our style and the level of production that our show has. I'm really excited for when those come out.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, I mean that Deadlands Kickstarter campaign is how I found out about you guys, and I mean
Doing work.
my question would be, how did that how did that union come about? How did Pinnacle reach out to you? Did you reach out to Pinnacle? How'd that go?
Well, we were invited to Genghis Khan by the Rocky Mountain Savages.
Mm-hmm.
Shout out, you two. And we sort of went out. We hung out with them, and there was like a Friday night get together sort of thing. And Chris was like, "Hey, you guys, you got to meet Shane. You got to meet Shane." And so he literally calls Shane out of his hotel room. And I don't think Shane was particularly pleased about getting pulled out of his hotel room at 11 o'clock at night. But he came down. We talked for a few minutes. And he was like, "Hey, you should run a game for me sometime." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, man, that'd be sweet." And then a few months later, I got an email that said, "Hey, we're doing this Kickstarter. Want you to be a part of it." And then I haven't been able to talk about it for like a year. And now here we are. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, they very graciously hit us up and sponsor the episodes, and we got to see some of the new rules, which, listening back, we totally screwed up new dueling. I'm so sorry, Shane, but that's fine. It's fine. Sure, everybody makes those mistakes at the table. We're just a game, you guys. We're just playing a game.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned the Rocky Mountain Savages. Are you thinking about potentially going out to Deadwood in September?
Can't, man. I can't. We thought about it. We also missed their cruise, the Savage Cruise. It's fine. I'm just a working class dude, man. I don't have that much money for vacation.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, it's sort of reserved for me and my wife doing stuff, and my wife does not want to go to Deadwood, which is understandable, completely understandable.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe one day.
Yeah, I'm planning on going to Deadwood. I kind of gave the pitch to my wife about coming with me. Again, Elfie has no interest in going out to the desert to play Deadlands and do. She doesn't like people. So,
which, to be fair, like, that's the correct opinion to have. Like. But yeah, man, it is what it is. One of these days, they throw so many events. I'm real
Mhm.
jealous seeing all their videos, but at least they're
Mhm.
having fun.
I do. I need to get them on the show so we can talk about Deadwood, because I'm super jazzed about that event. If there have been so many cons where I was like, all right, 2020 is the year. I'm gonna go to all these different cons, and then all these different
Yeah,
cons get canceled.
yeah, it's brutal, man. We were thinking about doing Gen Con this year, which we were
Mhm.
probably too late to sign up for anyway, but I feel similarly.
Mhm.
Sucks. Whole
Well, yeah,
world
and
got
they
shut down.
they took Gen Con entirely online this year, so
Yeah, I'm not about that. I'm
yeah.
sorry. I'm sorry, folks at Gen Con. I don't know any of you personally, but
Mhm.
why would I do that? I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
like I run both of my D&D games online now, which I already don't like. My job involves video conferencing. I do this podcast. I have enough looking at my webcam, talking into my microphone in my life. I don't need conventions to be that as well.
yeah, totally. I feel that for sure.
Hmm.
But we'll keep going to Genghis Khan. I mean, it's local, so it's super easy for us.
Mhm.
And that's been fun, but one of these years we'll make it out to something else.
Mhm. Now that's one. Genghis Khan is one that I definitely need to make the trip out for, because I believe, in fact, I'm pretty certain that's one that Carl routinely does. So have you been able to get in on a Carl Kiesler game?
I have not. I'm pretty sure I did meet him. I did meet
Mhm.
him on that same night I met Shane. I very ignorantly did not know who he was, and then came home and went, "Oh, okay, yeah, yeah, makes sense." No, I haven't. I was really bad about playing con games, to be honest. The first time we went, we tried to do a bunch, but then it snowed and it was just really terrible to get to games in general. And then the second time, we didn't even sign up for any games. It was Valentine's Day weekend, which was
Mhm.
kind of a problem for a lot of us to figure out with work schedules and stuff. And then we showed up and are just hung out with our good friends Doug and Allie all weekend and really just hung out with them. We kind of
Mhm.
dipped out of the convention a few days early just to hang out with them. But it was a good time. Next year we'll be more on the ball and everybody will be able to show up before, Saturday night. Uh
Mhm.
it's cool.
Looks like Master Malicious says, "Hey there, friendos." Hello, Master Malicious.
Hey buddy, how are you? That's good old Marshall. It's
Gotcha.
Marshall. He's one of the players.
Absolutely. But yeah, Carl. I had a similar encounter where I was completely ignorant of who Carl is. Only mine was online. Um, he he followed me on Instagram because I post minis that I paint, and I was just like, oh, this guy followed me, and so I saw his Instagram page, and I was like, oh yeah, he paints minis too. That's cool. And then I'm flipping through my Suede book, and at the very title page, as I'm getting ready to do my review on this podcast, I go, Carl Kiesler. Doesn't he follow me on Instagram?
That's great,
And so I
man.
look and I'm like, yeah, that's him. And so I immediately shoot a message. I'm like, hey, I just figured out who you are. You want to come on the show?
It's cool.
And it turns out that Carl Kiesler may, in fact, be my id made manifest in human form.
Why do you say that?
Well, I mean, we started talking and we'd never really had a conversation before, but we immediately
Yeah.
land on my two favorite movies, that being Sin City and Tombstone.
Wow.
And he's talking about this Sin City game that he did in Savage Worlds and how, he ran it at a convention, and then, he has his own company, Doghouse Rules, which they do this Savage Worlds game called Trailer Park Shark Attack, which is
Totally.
Florida with like Sharknado stuff, and it's amazing. And Carl is truly a visionary in the realm of running RPGs, and I've seen some of the materials that he does for his players. Shane told me that he did a Star Wars game where the character sheets were like Kenner blister packs from the action figures. So
I'll look it up. I'll look it up.
yeah. Yeah, next time at Genghis Khan, hopefully I'll be there too, but hopefully we can get it on a Carl game.
That would be dope. I think next time too, I just need to sign up earlier, you know. I'm just bad at conventions. I don't understand how they work. No one's told me how they work. No one I know goes to these things. So we're just got to muddle through it every time. But yeah, that would be pretty cool for sure. I know the only conversation I had with Shane in person, he was pretty happy about that game, that Trailer Park Shark game.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And the one conversation I had with Shane was me trying to impress him with the fact that I put John Wesley Hardin in my game, and he was like, "Well, good luck with that." And I should have taken that as a warning that this is not going to go over well with my players. But then he showed up on the podcast twice, and we had some great conversations. So,
hey, you know, you win some, you lose some. That's why I always say, you know,
yeah,
it just happens, man.
And it looks like Marshall is not doing well in Apex Legends. Which, as someone who's played Apex Legends approximately 5 times, I'm right there with you every single time, Marshall.
Yeah, I'm on the same page with you, buddy. Same page for sure.
I don't do the only multiplayer games I play are board games and Dungeons and Dragons and other tabletop RPGs. That's what I do.
Yeah, I really enjoy the single player aspect of video games these days. You know, it's like the one thing where I don't have to interact with other people. And it's like, I'm not going to muddy that by doing these multiplayer experiences, you guys. Come on. I just want to relax.
Yeah, I very much view video games as movies that I'm controlling. And so when it comes to multiplayer stuff, especially multiplayer stuff that doesn't have story, at that point I'm like, what's the point? I'll just play D&D.
Yeah. We're on the same page. We're on the same page. So I guess instead of being bad at Apex Legends, Marshall, just stop playing, man. Just quit. Just quit. Just quit. I'm sure that's not the first time you've heard that in your life. Just quit.
Now, Marshall, I have not tried Red Dead Online yet. I have played Red Dead Redemption 2. Fun game. I've heard mixed things about Red Dead Online, but I am down to give that a try.
Give it a try together. You got PS4? We'll talk about it later.
I am a PC gamer, so.
Okay. Sorry, Marshall. You're out, buddy. Oh, man.
And yes, Doug, it is savage because this is a savage world.
Oh, got it. Watch this, dude. That was a dab. Is that dated yet? Is that dated? I don't know.
I'm going to get up and floss here in just a second. And by floss, I of course mean clean the remnants of dinner from between my teeth. Because I don't know how to do that dance. And I don't care to learn.
Yeah, why would you?
I'm 24 going on 40, so
it would be cool to be able to dance not like a complete idiot, but you know, what can you do? Instead, I'll spend my time learning card tricks because I'm sure that's cooler. I'm sure.
Close-up magic.
Yeah, it's way cooler. Everybody talks about the coolest people in the world, and they all fucking know close-up magic, okay?
Absolutely.
Step one.
Elfie, if we weren't married, I'd boot you.
Uh-oh. Trouble in paradise.
The cha-cha slide. The cha-cha slide is one of those things that triggers me, and I can't explain why. I just don't like it.
What does it say if I don't know what that is? What does that say?
It's that song that says slide to the left, slide to the right that plays at every single wedding, family reunion, bar mitzvah, whatever it is that brings people together that has a dance floor, that song's always playing.
Yeah, I can picture it now. You're right. That seems justifiable.
And
It-
there's something in my core that just well, for one thing, I don't like being told what to do.
mm,
And I feel like dancing should just be a thing that happens. It's just kind of spontaneous, and if you're
yeah,
good, you're good, and if you're bad, then you're like 95% of the population. Don't tell me how to do the dance.
yeah, yeah. I'm on board with you for sure. Unless you're ballroom dancing or
Hmm.
like tap dancing or you know.
Yeah.
But I agree. I agree.
Yeah, well, I am definitely looking forward to getting my Deadlands: The Weird West Kickstarter. Not the least of which, so I can put these guys on the table. I've got some
Ooh,
miniatures here. Those of you who are listening on audio will not benefit from this, but you can follow me at Howard_Ryan Gregg on Instagram and see these guys. But I've got these Western minis from Knuckle Duster Miniatures that are basically the cast of Tombstone and a few others. But I've got Sam Elliott here.
man, beautiful. I think something I'm sad about doing our show is we don't get to play with minis, and
Mm-hmm.
Savage Worlds is such a good minis game. It
Yes.
does it so well.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I just don't get the opportunity, but just the whole like knock the mini over for shaken is crazy. Like I ran a game with minis and I hadn't for a long time recently. I
Mm-hmm.
guess it was a year ago by recently, but ran it with 30 enemies and it was over in like 30 to 45 minutes. It was
Mm-hmm.
crazy. And that's not even like if you tried to do that in fifth edition, there would be no descriptions. I would be just head feverishly in a book trying to make sure I track damage. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so very cool from that aspect.
Mm-hmm.
One day when the world is back together, you'll be able to use those minis, man. One day.
Absolutely. Gibson and Marshall are now trying to trigger me with
The cha cha slide.
defenses of the cha-cha slide, as well as mentioning the hokey pokey.
I'm sure that's just out of spite.
Yeah.
Ignore them. You do even dance. Do you two even dance? I don't think so. I don't think so.
The only dance I do is the lawnmower.
I do the shopping cart.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I do.
Absolutely. There is, from my days of acting, there is a YouTube video of a Wild Wing Cafe commercial that I believe aired a few times late at night of me uh, at my heaviest dancing, and it's simultaneously one of the best and worst things out there of me. I'm
Yeah.
both proud and ashamed of it, and I will put the link in the description so everyone can watch me embarrass myself. I got paid a good amount of money to embarrass myself, but I embarrassed myself, and
Damn.
people saw it on television.
I mean, if you're getting paid though, like what are they gonna say? Somebody makes fun of you, could be like, I got paid for it, man.
Yeah.
What do you want from me?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, Caleb, thank you for coming on the show. This has been great. Your players here have been fantastic on the show. I love reaching out to other people who love these games that we play, and who create this content, especially for something like Deadlands, which really is only now getting its due in the content world. So
Yeah.
I thank you guys for putting out good quality stuff, and I look forward to hearing what you release with the Kickstarter stuff.
Thanks, man. I'm real excited. If you're looking to find that, it should not be very hard. At some point it'll be on Pinnacle's website. I assume it will be an email. If it's not on either of those, you can go to soundslikeCrows.com or do Sounds Like Crows, spelled like Russell Crowe with an E. We're on all platforms, so yeah, check it out. But either way, it's been a pleasure, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And Gibson Taylor, thank you for the follow. So what I like to do at the end of the episode, just give you the opportunity to anything that you've got to promote. Obviously, with the content coming out now, there's some stuff, but just anything you want to talk about, promote right now. It is your floor. Go ahead and do it.
I do a second show. It's called Omen's Call. It's D&D 5th edition. I think we're like 10 episodes in. It's releasing every other week. So if you like me don't have a lot of time for podcasts, I think it's a good show for you. It's dramatic like Crows is.
Mhm.
Um, I'm really excited to run a level 3 to level 20 game and really like play out the scale of that in a way that's satisfying. I've never run a game where players are fighting gods at the end of a campaign, and I'd like it to get there. So if you want to be along for that ride from the beginning, check it out. I think it's pretty cool. And then yeah, sounds like Crows. We've talked way too much about. I'm on Twitter at Marshall Caleb. Yeah, that's it. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, guys, that is going to do it for today's episode. Obviously, this Saturday, join us at 9 a.m. CDT for Danishes and Dragons. The topic is TBD right now, both on the gaming side and on the breakfast side. Caleb and your my new follower, Gibson, and all you guys, if you are up at 9 a.m. Central, I do a morning show where I talk about both gaming and breakfast called Danishes and Dragons. It's a ton of fun. You guys should come hang out. But next week on Rollin' Bones, we are going to bring back John Hambone McGuire from the Vintage RPG podcast. He and I not only share the common bond of RPGs, but the common bond of wrestling. And we are going to talk about one of the worst wrestling RPGs that was ever released, WWF or WWE Know Your Role. You can see from this cover, it's abysmal. Bob Holly is on the cover of this book. That should tell you just about everything you need to know about it. I'm excited for this episode. It's going to be fantastic. All of you wrestling fans and all of you RPG fans should check this out. But until then, whether you rolled a 1 or a 20, or as I say with Savage Worlds people, whether your dice exploded or you came up snake eyes, I'm so glad that you rolled your bones with me, Ryan Howard, and I'll see you next time.
That's me doing the play out music.